First up tonight, we have Yann Yu. Yann is a founder of Parley Technologies, a startup fixing the contract collaboration and negotiation process. Previously a senior systems engineer at LucidWorks, Yann has architected and deployed Solar and Lucene search solutions for Fortune 500 companies, startups, and everything in between. Yann was also a software engineer at Basis Technology, working with natural language processing, machine learning, and internationalization. Tonight, Yann will tell us about Parley, a tool for streamlining and centralizing contract negotiations. So everybody, please welcome Yann.
Hey everyone, I'm Yann, and I'm a founder at this company called Parley. And today I'm here to show you guys the app we've built, but more generally I'm here to talk about how Meteor has been great for us for quickly building a business-targeted application, an enterprise application that fit a specific business pain point that we found. At Parley, we're making it easier to discuss, collaborate on, and negotiate contracts. Has anyone here ever bought or sold software for their company, maybe, that required a contract to sign? If you've gone through that contract process, you might remember it as being particularly complex and taking way longer than you expected. So to give a bit of background, my co-founder and I were selling that software to people at our last company. We were selling software to giant companies and small companies. And in all these cases, we were talking procurement teams. And we personally saw how universally in all these companies, no matter how big or small, how convoluted that software negotiation, that contract negotiation process was. There are lots of stakeholders on both sides. There's IT, there's legal, finance, operations, management, and all these people have to communicate with each other, but they don't talk together. They talk one-to-one, and they're sending documents back and forth, and they're trying to get the whole picture, but no one really does. And so it's a really fragmented process, and that's a lot of why it takes so long. And so we talked to these customers, and we'd ask, often huge companies, and we'd ask them whether the process was good, whether it worked for them. And they just say, that's the way it is. Email and MS Word are what we use. That's what we used before. That's why we've used other companies, and that's just how it is. And so we decided that we want to make a company out of that. And so at Parley, what we're trying to do is tackle the problem of helping groups of people in different companies collaborate and negotiate around a contract. So based on that, as you can tell, Parley is a pretty specific product that we're designing around a relatively niche market. In all honesty, it's not the most complex technical product. You know, it's not pushing the boundaries of computer science, but it's a real pain point that we've seen over and over. And there are people that would pay money for a solution that fixes for them. So since we found that idea, since we found that kind of seed of an idea, we've continued to learn more about it by talking to more people that deal with contracts. And we spent quite a bit of time just figuring out the general requirements of the solution, trying to figure out what we needed to build. And once we figured out enough, we started the development process. We've been working with Ian Serlin of the Useful.io team, and with them we decided to work with Meteor as our prototyping framework for this. So from having nothing, we had just some drawings, some user feedback, some high-level design documents. It took us 3 months. In 3 months, we built an application from the ground up with the Useful.io team that we brought back to those initial customers that we talked to. Those procurement people, they saw the application, they played with it, they were starting to understand through feeling it and seeing what it could do for them, how they could use it in their organization. But most importantly, we're actually now negotiating with some of those customers and turning them to real customers by negotiating contracts through our own application. So now that I've gotten kind of all the market stuff out of the way, I want to show you a little bit about what Parley actually does and how people are using it. So this is the Parley Dashboard. Parley being contract negotiation, each of these roughly represents a contract. So I'll just jump straight into one. If you ever used Microsoft Word, you can see that this document has already been redlined. You can see that they're kind of sorted by color. They all have a number that corresponds to them. And these numbers are how we kind of keep track of changes within these documents. And so these items here, they're numbered. They have their own threads. They exist on their own apart from the document. And I can go ahead and accept or reject any one of these given items. And if that reminds you a little bit of GitHub and pull requests, that's because that's exactly what we're modeled on. So we thought about, for example, in the beginning of maybe even using Git for some of this stuff, but we found that with Meteor and Mongo, we actually could build a pretty light version control system that handles our specific use case really, really well without having to resort to other packages like that. And so when I go ahead and accept this item here, that goes ahead, does some logic, and merges that back in. And so on the left side here, this document representation is actually using a project called Quill Jas. And Quill Jas is another tool that we found really, really helpful insofar as the data representation for Quill is really, really explicit. And combining that with the way that Meteor stores and syncs information, we can actually do some really light kind of operational transform stuff without needing anything more than just those two projects together. And so, like with pull requests, the way that I would go ahead and create one of these items that I'm talking about here is to go ahead and highlight a section of the document, delete a whole chunk of it, if I can highlight properly, and publish that item. So as these items are created, me as the lead for one side, I can approve items that have been created by the other side, and any items that I create have to be approved by the leader of the other side. And so what that means is that the document only changes when both sides approve of a document change. So you'll note that there's a little highlighted 3 here for showing that something's happened. This external chat acts as kind of a news feed. And this is really important for people working in the enterprise because they need to understand what's changing these documents over time. You can't rely on email chains. You can't rely on text messages or conversations that you had that you put in notes. So from the very beginning, we actually log all changes that happen to this document. And you can see down here that I accepted item 2 here, that the document version changed as a result, and that I created another item just shortly after that. And so the thing is, when you have all this information in here, when you have lots of stakeholders viewing this document, what will happen is things will get really confusing really fast. And so we actually allow you to click on item references in here and immediately filter this down. So again, Meteor having a lot of this stuff built in, being able to query the Mongo database, pull this information back, lets us create better filters and better ways to represent information for these enterprise users. I can then go ahead and maybe even reject this item, and it'll record that as well. So then, on top of the external chat, we also have an internal chat. And the internal chat is not quite as full-featured yet, but that allows teams within Parley to communicate with just each other. So here I have 2 sides that I can invite people into, or rather I can invite people to my side. And then now me and just Dave can communicate separately, apart from everybody else. And if we want to communicate with the other side, we go back to the external chat. And then jumping back to kind of other stuff that's important, we can actually create additional Parleys here, and we have built in the ability to import documents via drag and drop. And this is using Mammoth.js, which has been pretty good for us. We're thinking of maybe changing to another project just because we need more of a WYSIWYG import, but that's just kind of the last piece of technology we're using here in the stack. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're currently fundraising. We are building this out and selling to customers, and that's it. Any questions?
Questions for Yann?
Yep.
Let's get out of the way. What did you build the UI with?
Oh yes, what do we build the UI with? I think we just used Blaze. Yep, so it was there and it was the easiest thing we could do. That was what they had the most experience with, so we didn't want to mess with it too much. Yeah?
So you said you used Quill Jas?
Yes.
And you combine that with, so what was Quill Jas?
So Quill Jas is a WYSIWYG text editor. That's basically its entire purpose. I can't remember the guy's name who built it, but it was actually recommended to me by another friend who's worked a lot with kind of these simultaneous document editing tools, and it's built specifically to handle operational transform. Is kind of its whole purpose in a lot of ways, and so we started off using that for exactly that purpose. And you can find more of it at quill.js, I believe. Yep.
Did you ever think of experimenting with like natural language processing, where people can because you had a whole chat piece in there, where you could actually sort of automate some things in a natural language kind of way?
So the question is, have we ever thought about using natural language processing, maybe around the chat, around the documents, and things like that, right? Yes, with my background, I've thought a lot about that. There's a lot of pieces around contract analysis that are really interesting to us. In specific, when you're dealing with large organizations that are pushing out these contracts every single day, if you can analyze all your contracts and figure out this piece is negotiated 80% of the time, this piece takes 60 days to negotiate every single time, you can start making it more efficient for your organization to get through these contracts faster. And then you can apply that to chat as well and figure out more of that, get analytics on how your people are communicating. Maybe you shouldn't use this word in your negotiation anymore, stuff like that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yann.